It was the third day in a row Shadow wouldn't eat. Cole stood in the doorway of the small kitchen, arms crossed, watching the black German shepherd sniff the metal bowl and then walk away without so much as a lick. Normally, the dog inhaled his food before Cole could even turn around. "You're not sick," Cole muttered, more to himself than to Shadow. "You're acting like something's wrong." The dog padded to the back door instead, sitting perfectly still and staring through the glass at the yard. The frost on the pane fogged with each of Shadow's breaths. Cole followed his gaze. The yard was nothing special, a patch of snow-covered ground enclosed by a weathered wooden fence, beyond which the tree line pressed close. The wind lifted loose drifts here and there, revealing patches of dead grass beneath. Shadow's ears twitched forward, his posture alert. His tail didn't wag, it stayed low, stiff. "You want out?" Cole asked. The dog's head turned slightly toward him, then back to the yard. Cole sighed, pulling on his coat. "Fine. Let's see what's got your attention." Outside, the air cut straight to the bone. The snow had that thin crust on top that cracked under each step, and the late afternoon light painted everything in a cold gray. Shadow didn't waste time sniffing around like he usually did. He trotted straight toward the back corner of the yard, the one closest to the tree line. Cole followed, his boots crunching over the frozen ground. "Shadow, there's nothing." The dog stopped suddenly, head down, paws scraping at the snow. Cole frowned and came closer. The spot didn't look any different than the rest of the yard, just white snow with a few dead leaves caught in the crust. But Shadow was digging with quick, jerky motions, the snow flying behind him. "Hey, slow down," Cole said, kneeling beside him. He pulled his glove off and brushed the snow away where the dog had cleared it. Something hard lay beneath. At first, Cole thought it was just frozen soil. But then his fingertips hit wood, rough, splintered, and wet from the frost. A box. It wasn't big, maybe the size of a small crate, and it had no markings. Just weathered wood with nails rusting in their seams. Shadow backed up slightly, pacing in a tight circle, whining low in his throat. Cole's stomach tightened. Where the hell did this come from? He scraped more snow away, enough to grip one end of the box. It was heavier than it should have been for its size. The cold bit through his bare fingers as he pulled it free from the frozen earth. The bottom was damp. A dark stain spread across one corner, the kind that wasn't just water. Cole's gut told him not to open it, not here, not without knowing what he was dealing with. But Shadow stepped forward, placing one paw on the lid, staring at him like the answer was inside. "You've been refusing food because of this?" Cole asked quietly. The dog didn't blink. Cole glanced at the tree line. For a moment, he thought he saw movement, something shifting between the trees. But when he focused, the branches stood still. He turned back to the box. The rusty nails holding the lid looked fragile. He could probably pry it open with the flat of his knife. Shadow whined again, softer this time. Cole crouched, bracing the box between his knees, and slid the knife's tip under the edge. The first nail came loose with a groan of wood. The second gave way more easily. The wind picked up suddenly, sweeping through the yard, and for a brief second it sounded like a voice moving with it. Cole froze, knife halfway to the third nail, eyes scanning the yard. Nothing. Just the sound of the trees and the wind. He turned back to the box and worked the third nail free. The lid shifted. Cole hesitated. "All right," he muttered, "let's see what you've been trying to tell me." He lifted the lid. The smell hit him first, sharp, metallic, and unmistakable. Blood. Not fresh, but not old enough to fade completely. Inside, wrapped in layers of rotting cloth, was something small and pale. At first, it looked like an animal, maybe a rabbit. But as the cloth fell away under the cold wind, the shape became clearer. It was a hand. Small. Human. Shadow growled, low and deep, staring not at the box but at the treeline beyond the fence. Cole's grip on the lid tightened until his knuckles ached. The hand wasn't decayed the way it should have been in the cold, the skin was intact, the nails clean, like it had been placed there deliberately and preserved. Cole forced himself to rewrap it and drop the lid back into place. His eyes went to the fence again. That earlier movement he dismissed. He wasn't so sure now. Shadow's growl deepened. Cole stood, box in one hand, rifle in the other. "All right, boy. Let's get inside." As they crossed the yard, Cole felt it, the undeniable sensation of being watched. The storm clouds overhead dimmed the light even more, and by the time they reached the door, it felt like the trees were leaning closer. Inside, Shadow stayed at the back door, staring out into the yard long after Cole had set the box on the table. Cole poured himself a glass of water, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Because whatever that was in the yard, he knew it wasn't the end of it. It was the beginning. Cole didn't touch the box again that night. It sat in the center of the kitchen table, the faint smell of old blood lingering around it like an invisible cloud. Every time he passed by, he caught Shadow's eyes following it, not fearful, but alert, as though the dog expected it to move on its own. Cole had thought about calling it in. He'd even reached for his phone twice. But each time, his gut told him to wait. If this was what it looked like, the moment he made that call, the yard would be swarming with uniforms, reporters, maybe even feds. And whatever answers there were might vanish under the weight of procedure. He poured coffee instead, sat at the table, and stared at the box. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Even the hum of the old refrigerator seemed lower than usual. Shadow stayed by the back door, his head on his paws but his eyes open, every so often lifting his muzzle to sniff at the cold air leaking in through the cracks. Cole decided he needed more information before involving anyone else. The cloth around the hand, maybe it held a clue. A tag, a marking, anything. He pulled the box closer, careful not to disturb the wrap more than necessary. His fingers brushed the rotting fabric, stiff with frost, and he began to peel it back just enough to see the skin again. There, on the inside of the wrist. A faint bruise, oddly shaped, almost like the imprint of a ring or small bracelet. It wasn't old. Whoever this belonged to hadn't been dead long before it was buried. Shadow's ears snapped forward. Cole froze. "What is it?" The dog rose silently, moving to the door with his tail low and his body tense. His nose pressed against the glass, then his head turned sharply toward the far end of the yard, the same corner where he'd dug earlier. Cole followed his gaze. Something was standing at the fence. He couldn't make out much through the frost in the dim light, but it was tall, too tall to be crouched. It wasn't moving. Just watching. Cole's hand went instinctively to the rifle leaning against the wall. He took 2 steps toward the door, his pulse spiking. And then the figure was gone. No sound. No footprints in the snow. Just gone. He stood at the glass for another 30 seconds, scanning every inch of the yard. Nothing. The treeline looked the same as before, still and dark. He turned back toward the table, and stopped. The box's lid was slightly ajar. Cole's stomach dropped. He hadn't left it that way. He moved closer, the rifle still in his grip, and peered inside. The cloth was there, but the hand wasn't. "Shadow," he said sharply. The dog was still at the door, hackles up, growl low. Cole's mind ran through possibilities, but none of them made sense. There had been no time for anyone to slip in, no sound of the door, and yet, the thing in the box was gone. A thump came from outside, soft, but heavy enough to carry through the floorboards. Cole crossed to the door, throwing it open. The cold bit at his face instantly, but he barely noticed. The yard was empty. Snow swirled in the wind, erasing whatever marks might have been left behind. But there, in the far corner where Shadow had dug earlier, something new. A second patch of disturbed snow. Cole stepped toward it, rifle ready. The wind howled, carrying the faint smell of iron. When he reached the corner, his boots sank slightly. The snow here was softer, churned. He crouched and brushed it aside with his glove. No box this time. Just a hole. A hole deep enough for something, or someone, to have climbed out. Shadow growled behind him, and Cole turned just in time to see the dog's gaze fixed on the treeline again. For a moment, Cole thought he saw it, movement, just beyond the fence. A pale flash between the trunks, gone almost before he could track it. The wind shifted. This time, there was no mistaking it. A voice. Faint. Childlike. Coming from the trees. Cold. Cole didn't wait. He grabbed Shadow's collar and backed toward the house, eyes never leaving the dark between the trees. Once inside, he bolted the door. The box sat on the table, the lid still crooked. Empty. He looked at Shadow. We're not staying here tonight. The dog didn't need convincing. Cole threw essentials into a bag, ammo, food, a flashlight, a first aid kit. He paused, looking at the box again. Whatever had been in it was loose now. And if it had been buried in his yard, it had a reason to come back. The wind rattled the back door, and for a split second, the glass frosted over in a perfect handprint. When it cleared, the yard was empty again. Cole didn't sleep that night. Cole didn't even take his boots off that night. He stayed in the chair by the kitchen window, Shadow curled but alert at his feet, both of them watching the yard through the narrow slice of glass where frost hadn't yet formed. The hours dragged. The wind never fully stopped, carrying with it the creaks of the old fence, the occasional rattle of branches against each other. Every so often, Shadow's ears twitched toward the treeline, but nothing crossed into the yard again. By the time the first thin light of morning spread across the snow, Cole's eyes burned from lack of sleep. He stood, stretched the stiffness from his shoulders, and glanced at Shadow. "Come on," he murmured. "We're getting out of here." The dog rose instantly, tail low but ready. Cole grabbed the bag he'd packed, food, water, ammo, and slung it over his shoulder. He left the box on the table. Empty as it was, something about taking it felt like an invitation to trouble. The air outside was still and biting, the kind that stung the inside of his nose with every breath. He crunched down the shoveled path toward the truck, Shadow beside him. Halfway there, he stopped. The snow around the truck wasn't undisturbed like it should have been. A trail of prints led directly up to the driver's side door. They weren't boot prints. They weren't paw prints either. Each impression was oval, deep in the center, tapering to a faint point at one end, like a bare foot without toes. Too long to belong to a child, too narrow to be an adult's. Cole's hand tightened on his rifle. He stepped forward slowly, following the line of prints. They circled the truck once, then angled back toward the house. Toward the back corner of the yard. Shadow growled low, the sound vibrating through the cold air. Cole followed the trail to where it stopped abruptly in the middle of the yard. There was no turning back, no change in direction, just an end, as though whatever made them had vanished into thin air. He scanned the fence. No gaps. No broken boards. Just stillness. "You're not making this easy," he muttered, more to himself than to whatever was out there. He turned to head back, and stopped. The box was sitting in the snow, halfway between him and the house. Cole's pulse kicked. He knew he'd left it on the table. Locked inside the house. He approached slowly, rifle up, scanning the windows for signs of forced entry. None. The box was closed now. Its nails, which he'd loosened the night before, were bent back into place, though not hammered, just jammed into the wood as if by sheer force. Shadow wouldn't go near it. The dog stood a good 10 feet back, ears pinned, eyes locked on the box like it was alive. Cole knelt beside it, not touching it yet. The wood was damp, darker than it had been, as though it had been left out in the snow for days, not hours. He slid the tip of his glove under the lid. The nails gave way far too easily this time. He lifted it just enough to see inside. Empty. Still, the smell was there, that faint, metallic tang that didn't belong anywhere but on a battlefield or in a slaughterhouse. Cole shut it again. He took it back inside, setting it on the table where it had been before. He didn't know why, maybe because the idea of leaving it outside felt like surrender. Shadow padded to the back door again, staring through the glass at the same corner of the yard. Cole moved beside him. "What are you seeing, boy?" The dog didn't move, didn't blink. Cole followed his gaze. At first, he saw only snow and fence in the shadowed edge of the treeline. Then he noticed it, one fence post leaning slightly inward, just enough to be wrong. And in the shadow it cast, something pale. A face. Too still to be human, too perfect in its symmetry. It didn't blink. Cole reached for the latch, then stopped himself. He couldn't shake the feeling that if he stepped outside right now, he wouldn't make it back in. The face shifted, not closer, not away, but sideways, moving along the fence line with a slow, unnatural glide. Shadow's growl deepened. The pale shape reached the far post, then simply dropped from sight. Cole stayed at the door for another minute, scanning for movement. Nothing. He turned to Shadow. "Change of plans. We're not leaving yet." The dog didn't relax. Cole knew why. Whatever was in the yard wasn't just passing through. It was circling. Watching. Waiting for something. And he had the sickening feeling it had to do with the thing that had been in the box. Cole didn't bother unpacking the bag he'd prepared. It sat by the door, ready for when the situation tipped from unnerving to dangerous. He knew, deep down, that moment was coming soon. Shadow wouldn't leave the back door. The dog's eyes tracked invisible lines across the yard, muscles taut, tail unmoving. Every so often, his ears flicked back toward Cole, as if checking that his human hadn't wandered off. Cole poured another cup of coffee and forced himself to drink it, even though his stomach was too tight to take in much. The pale face at the fence kept replaying in his head, not because it had been there, but because of how still it had been. No sway of breath, no twitch, no shift of light across skin. It was like looking at a mask, except masks don't glide sideways like that. The decision came quick. He set the mug down, checked his rifle, and slipped out the front door instead of the back. If the thing was circling, he could come up behind it. The snow crunched under his boots in that crisp, loud way that made him grit his teeth. He kept low, moving around the side of the house until the back corner came into view. Shadow was still inside, visible through the glass, staring toward the leaning fence post. Cole scanned the yard, the fence, the treeline. Nothing. Then, movement. Not at the fence, but beneath it. The snow there bulged, split, and something pale began to rise up from under it. First a hand, slender and jointed wrong, fingers bending too far back. Then a head, skin stretched thin over its frame, eyes deep and glassy but fixed in an unblinking stare. Cole's breath fogged the air. He raised the rifle. The thing kept coming. It didn't crawl over the snow, it unfolded from it, rising in a series of unnatural jerks until it stood just inside the yard. Its bare feet pressed into the snow without leaving proper prints, only shallow impressions that melted inward as though the ground itself didn't want to hold their shape. "Stop right there," Cole called, his voice low and steady. The thing tilted its head slowly, as though considering the words. Its mouth opened. No breath came out, just a sound like dry leaves sliding over each other. Shadow barked once from inside, sharp and urgent. The creature's head twitched toward the noise. Then, in one impossible movement, it dropped low to the ground, sprinting toward the house in a blur that churned the snow in its wake. Cole fired. The shot tore through the air, striking where its shoulder should have been, but the thing didn't even slow. It reached the base of the back steps and stopped dead, like it had hit an invisible wall. It stood there, head cocked, one hand reaching out toward the door but not crossing the threshold. Cole's mind ran through what he was seeing. It wasn't hesitating because of him, it was hesitating because something else was holding it back. The fence. The yard. The box. The box was still on the table inside. The creature's eyes shifted from the door to the window, to where the box sat in plain view. Its mouth opened again, wider this time, the skin around it stretching thin. Cole circled toward the back, rifle up. He got within 20 feet before the thing turned and looked directly at him. Not at the rifle. At him. And then, without a sound, it dropped back into the snow. Not onto it, into it. The surface closed over as if it had never been there. Cole's breath came hard in the cold air. Shadow was barking now, pressed against the glass. Cole stepped onto the porch and went inside, bolting the door behind him. He knelt beside the dog, who was still bristling. "You saw it too," he murmured. Shadow didn't blink. Cole moved to the table, staring down at the box. It hadn't changed. Still closed. Still damp. But now he knew, whatever had been buried here wasn't just dead. It had something out there looking for it. And maybe, just maybe, the box was the only thing keeping it from coming in. Cole didn't touch the box for an hour after the thing vanished. He just sat at the table with it in front of him, staring, Shadow curled under the window but never closing his eyes. The yard outside looked normal again, as if it hadn't been disturbed. Snow lay smooth and unbroken except for the half-filled tracks from earlier. If not for the churned patch near the leaning fence post, Cole might have convinced himself he'd imagined the entire encounter. But the air still felt wrong. He thought about the way the creature had stopped at the base of the back steps, how it had reached toward the door but not crossed the threshold. It hadn't been afraid of him. It had been afraid of something else. Cole's eyes went to the box. The idea came slow, and he didn't like it even as it formed. If the box was keeping it back, there had to be a reason. And if there was a reason, he needed to know what it was. Shadow lifted his head when Cole reached for the box. The dog's lips twitched back, just slightly, not a growl but a warning. "I know," Cole said quietly. "But we have to know." He slid the box to the edge of the table, grabbed his gloves, and lifted it carefully. The wood was colder than it should have been, as if it had been sitting in ice instead of the warm kitchen. Shadow followed him to the back door, every step stiff and reluctant. Cole opened the door just enough to step outside, the cold biting instantly at the exposed skin of his face. The yard lay still. No sign of movement. The leaning fence post stood in the corner, shadows pooling around its base. Cole set the box down on the porch railing. Nothing happened at first. Then Shadow's ears snapped forward. Cole followed the dog's gaze. At the far edge of the yard, snow shifted. Just slightly, like something moving beneath it. The movement stopped, then started again, angling toward the porch. Cole gripped his rifle, watching as the snow seemed to swell in a slow, undulating wave, inching closer. 20 feet away, the surface broke. The pale head rose first, followed by those two long arms. The creature's black, glassy eyes locked on the box. It didn't look at Cole. Didn't look at Shadow. Only the box. Cole's pulse hammered in his throat. He forced himself to stay still, to watch. The thing moved closer, each step careful, deliberate. At 10 feet away, it stopped. The air between it and the box seemed to shiver, like heat rising from asphalt in summer. The creature tilted its head, mouth opening slightly. That dry-leaf whisper came again, but this time it formed something almost like words. Give it. Cole's grip on the rifle tightened. Not a chance. The head twitched at the sound of his voice. The thing's shoulders rolled forward, its frame bending in ways bones shouldn't allow. It took one slow step closer, and the air shimmered harder, like an invisible wall pressing it back. Cole realized then, it couldn't cross that space. Not without the box. Shadow barked sharply, the sound cracking through the cold. The creature's head snapped toward him. Cole moved fast, grabbing the box and stepping back into the doorway. The moment the box left the railing, the thing let out a sound, not loud, but deep enough to vibrate in Cole's chest, a low, almost subsonic growl. Then it sank. Not down the steps, not away. It dropped into the snow, vanishing beneath the surface as if the yard had swallowed it whole. Cole slammed the door shut, bolting it hard. Shadow stood staring at the porch, every muscle tight. Cole set the box back on the table, staring at it like it might sprout legs and walk away. If the thing wanted it this badly, it meant the box was more than just a container. It was bait. And somehow, that meant someone, or something, had buried it here on purpose. Cole didn't move for a long time after the thing vanished again. The kitchen was silent except for Shadow's slow, measured breathing and the faint ticking of the old clock on the wall. The box sat on the table between them, damp and cold, like it had no business being indoors. It wasn't random. It couldn't be. Someone had buried it in his yard. Cole replayed the past few months in his mind. He'd only been at the property since early winter, inheriting it after his uncle passed away. The man had been a recluse, no friends that Cole knew of, no nearby family. The neighbors had barely known his name. So who would have been here before? And who would have had a reason to bury this? Shadow shifted, his gaze locked on the box. His ears flicked toward the back door every few seconds, like he expected the pale thing to return. Cole ran a hand through his hair. "You knew, didn't you?" he murmured. The dog's head tilted slightly, but his eyes didn't leave the box. Cole thought back to the first day they'd arrived, how Shadow had avoided the back corner of the yard, giving it a wide berth even before the snow fell. At the time, Cole had chalked it up to scent. Maybe a coyote had come through. But now, maybe it had been there longer. He stood, moving to the small desk tucked into the corner of the living room. The drawers were stuffed with his uncle's old papers, utility bills, faded receipts, a few unopened letters. In the bottom drawer, he found something different. A small, battered notebook with a cracked spine and pages that smelled faintly of mildew. The handwriting inside was cramped, the ink faded in places. Most of it was mundane, weather notes, crop planting dates from years past, occasional lists of supplies. But halfway through, the tone shifted. "It's getting closer." Saw it at the fence again. Buried the box deeper this time. Shadow keeps guard but won't go near it. I don't know how many more nights we can keep it out. Cole's stomach tightened. Shadow? The same name as his dog. But this couldn't be the same one. German shepherds didn't live that long. He flipped forward. Dreamed of the yard again. Snow piled high. It was standing by the porch, watching. Tried to step inside but stopped. The box still works. Must never open it. If anyone finds this, don't dig where the ground feels soft after frost. Cole glanced toward the back corner of the yard. Even from inside, he could see where the snow had a different texture, smoother somehow, like it had been tamped down. He kept reading. If it gets out, it won't stop with me. The last entry was dated 2 weeks before his uncle's death. Cole set the notebook down slowly. He didn't like the direction his thoughts were taking. If the box had been buried to keep the thing in, not just to keep it away, then moving it, bringing it inside, might have been the worst thing he could have done. Shadow growled, deep in his throat. Cole turned. The dog was at the front window now, staring out toward the road. Cole crossed the room, rifle in hand. Outside, the snow was still falling in fine flakes, the road half hidden under white. But there, movement. A figure, trudging through the snow toward the house. Not the pale thing. This one was bundled in a heavy coat, hood pulled low, scarf wrapped high. Cole's gut said this wasn't random. He stepped onto the porch, keeping the rifle low but ready. Shadow stayed at his side, tail stiff. The figure stopped 10 feet from the steps, lifting a gloved hand in greeting. "You're Cole?" The voice was muffled but carried in the cold. "Depends on who's asking." The figure hesitated, then reached into their coat slowly and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Your uncle told me to give you this, if you ever found the box." Cole's blood ran cold. "When?" "Before he died." The wind picked up, swirling snow between them. Cole took the steps down, keeping his eyes on the figure as he took the paper. It was old, yellowed at the edges, folded so many times it was soft at the creases. Inside, the handwriting was his uncle's again. "If you're reading this, the box has been moved. You need to put it back before the ground freezes solid. Do not let it sit inside the house. Do not let the thing touch it. It is not after you. It is after what's inside." Cole looked up from the note, but the figure was already backing away. "Wait." They shook their head. "I can't stay here." "You shouldn't either." And then they turned and walked into the curtain of snow, their shape swallowed by white in seconds. Cole stood there, the note in one hand, the rifle in the other. Shadow whined low. The box was still inside. And the ground was only going to get harder to dig. By the time Cole stepped back inside, the light outside had dimmed to a heavy, gray twilight. The snow was coming faster now, blown sideways by the wind, coating the windows in icy patterns. The box sat exactly where he'd left it on the table, looking smaller than ever, but heavier, somehow, in a way that had nothing to do with its actual weight. Shadow stood near it, but not too close, his gaze flicking between Cole and the back door as if urging him to get it over with. Cole read his uncle's note again, tracing the words with a gloved finger. "Put it back before the ground freezes solid." The message was simple, but the urgency in the handwriting was what stuck with him. His uncle's letters were always steady, careful. But these looked rushed. He slung the rifle over his shoulder, grabbed a heavy spade from the mudroom, and picked up the box. The wood bit at his gloves with its unnatural cold. "Stay close," he told Shadow. They stepped outside into the storm. The air slapped his face instantly, the cold needling into his skin. Snow squeaked under his boots as he trudged toward the back corner of the yard. The leaning fence post loomed through the swirling white, marking the place. Shadow stayed at his side until they were halfway there. Then he stopped, growling low, his fur bristling. Cole turned. "What is it?" Shadow's gaze wasn't on the fence. It was fixed on the snow behind them. Cole's stomach tightened. The wind was too loud for him to hear anything approaching, but he didn't need to, the shift in Shadow's body told him enough. He gripped the spade tighter and pressed on. The faster he got the box in the ground, the better. The snow at the base of the leaning post was softer, just like his uncle had written. Cole set the box down and drove the spade into the ground. The frozen crust broke with a crunch, revealing darker, looser soil beneath. He worked fast, scraping away the snow, digging deep enough to swallow the box whole. His breath came in harsh clouds, mixing with the white swirl of the storm. Then Shadow barked, sharp, urgent, the kind of bark that said now. Cole looked up. The snow about 20 feet away was moving. Not drifting, not blowing, heaving, like something massive was forcing its way to the surface. Cole's pulse hammered. He dug faster, every muscle in his arms burning with effort. The hole was almost deep enough, just a few more scoops. The snow broke open. The pale creature rose from it, taller this time, its frame unfolding like it had been compacted underground. Its eyes locked on the box immediately. Cole dropped the spade, grabbed the box, and shoved it into the hole. The creature moved, fast, too fast, churning the snow as it closed the distance. Cole kicked snow over the box, his gloves clumsy against the cold, his movements frantic. The thing reached the invisible line again, stopping just short of the fence post. Its head twitched, mouth opening wider than before. That dry-leaf whisper came again, this time with more force. "Mine." Cole grabbed the spade and jammed the soil and snow back into the hole, tamping it down hard. The moment the box was covered, the air between him and the creature shimmered, that strange, heat-like ripple he'd seen before. The thing's body convulsed, like it had been struck. It took a step back, its gaze never leaving the spot where the box was buried. Shadow barked again, stepping forward, every hair on his body raised. The creature's mouth closed slowly, unnaturally, like a door easing shut on its own. Then, without warning, it dropped straight into the snow and was gone. The storm swallowed the sound of its departure instantly. Cole didn't waste time. He finished packing the snow over the site, pressing it down until the ground looked undisturbed. His chest ached from the cold and exertion by the time he trudged back to the porch. Shadow stayed close now, not looking back. Inside, Cole bolted the door and leaned against it, his breath coming in ragged pulls. The box was back where it belonged. But somehow, the knot in his gut told him this wasn't over. The creature hadn't just been after the box. It had been after what was inside. And Cole had no idea if burying it again was enough to keep it there. Cole didn't light any lamps that night. The storm outside had eased slightly, but the moon was still hidden behind thick clouds, leaving the yard in a dim, blue-black haze. He sat at the kitchen table, rifle resting across his knees, Shadow lying at his feet with his head up, ears forward. Every so often, the dog's gaze flicked toward the back door, then the front window, then the side wall, a slow, methodical scan, as if tracking something moving outside. Cole had seen that kind of focus before, in combat zones. You didn't have to see the threat to know it was out there. The notebook was still open beside him, the last page weighed down with a coffee mug. His uncle's final entry stared back at him. "If it gets out, it won't stop with me." Cole had buried the box, but the knot in his stomach said he hadn't solved anything. Shadow's ears twitched sharply. Cole froze, straining to hear. At first, it was nothing but the faint whistle of wind along the eaves. Then, a sound. Soft. Almost delicate. Crunch. Snow, compacting under weight. Not steady footsteps, more like something moving in short bursts, stopping, then moving again. Cole stood silently, crossing to the front window. He didn't part the curtain all the way, just enough to glance out into the night. The yard was empty. The leaning fence post stood half buried in snow, unmoving. Then, at the far edge of his vision, he caught it, a ripple under the snow. Not above, not visible. Beneath. It slid along the fence line, slow, deliberate, until it vanished behind the shed. Cole's breath condensed against the cold glass. It wasn't gone. It was circling. He moved to the back door, peering through the small window. Nothing. But Shadow padded after him, hackles raised, gaze fixed low to the ground. Cole turned off the last light in the hallway and waited, watching. 10 minutes passed. Then the ripple came again, this time closer, angling toward the buried spot. Shadow growled, a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated in Cole's chest. The snow above the box's resting place began to sink, just slightly, like something was pressing from underneath. Cole's grip tightened on the rifle. The invisible barrier he'd seen earlier seemed to hold, the snow stopped sinking before it broke open. But then, the pressure shifted. The ripple moved away from the burial site, sweeping toward the side of the house. Cole's mind raced. If it couldn't get to the box from above, maybe it was looking for another way in. The crawl space. He moved fast, grabbing a flashlight from the counter. Shadow, with me. The wind knifed into him the moment he stepped outside. He skirted the side of the house, boots crunching through the snow until he reached the small wooden hatch that led under the foundation. The snow here was disturbed, faint depressions that didn't match boot prints or paw tracks. They were too long, too smooth, as if something had dragged itself. Cole crouched, shining the flashlight along the edge of the hatch. Two black, glassy eyes stared back at him from the darkness. He jerked back, raising the rifle, but the thing didn't rush forward. It just stayed there, its head tilted slightly, mouth closed this time. Then it lifted one long, skeletal hand and tapped the wood of the hatch. Once. Twice. The sound was impossibly loud in the cold air. Shadow barked sharply, stepping between Cole and the opening. The creature's hand froze mid-tap. Then it pulled back, slowly, sinking into the darkness beneath the house until only the eyes remained. They blinked once. Then vanished. Cole slammed the hatch shut and dropped the heavy latch into place. His heart was pounding hard enough to make his fingers tremble. Inside, he locked every door and window again. But the truth was sinking in, heavy as the snow outside. Burying the box had stopped it from taking whatever was inside. It hadn't stopped it from trying to take something else. Cole didn't sleep that night. He sat in the living room with the rifle across his lap, staring into the dark, the wind occasionally rattling the old windows. Shadow paced for hours, circling between the front door, the hallway, and the back porch like a sentry who knew the fight wasn't over. Every few minutes, Cole caught himself glancing toward the notebook. His uncle had spent years keeping the thing at bay, but he'd always played defense. And in the end, it had still been waiting. Cole wasn't built to wait. When the first pale hint of morning bled into the sky, he stood and moved to the mudroom. He grabbed the coil of heavy rope, a handful of steel stakes, and his last working trail camera. Shadow sat at the door, watching him with unblinking eyes. "We end this today," Cole said quietly. The storm had left the yard draped in a deceptive calm, the snow smooth and untouched. But he knew better. Somewhere out there, beneath the white, it was still moving, still watching. He headed straight for the leaning fence post, the place the thing always seemed to approach first. The air was colder here, sharper, as if the box still called to it from underground. Cole worked quickly, driving the stakes into the frozen ground in a wide half-circle around the burial site. From each stake, he strung the rope low to the snow, creating a subtle trip line. Along that line, he set small metal chimes, just enough to give sound in the stillness, not loud enough to alert the neighbors, if any were close enough to hear through the wind. The trail camera went on the fence post itself, angled low to catch the ground. If it came back, Cole wanted proof, something he could study. Shadow sat 10 feet away, facing the tree line, motionless except for the slow rise and fall of his breath. Cole straightened, scanning the yard. The silence pressed in, broken only by the occasional creak of the fence in the wind. Hours passed. He didn't go back inside, just paced slowly between the porch and the trap, eyes on the snow, hands stiff from the cold. It wasn't until the sun dipped low again that he heard it. The faintest jingle of metal on metal. Shadow's head snapped up instantly. Cole turned toward the trap, nothing. The snow was still. Then another jingle. This time, from the opposite side of the yard. Cole's pulse jumped. The trap was useless if the thing wasn't going to the box. He swung the rifle around, scanning the far fence line. The snow there was shifting in a slow ripple, heading toward the shed. Shadow took off before Cole could stop him, sprinting across the yard in a blur of black fur. Cole followed, boots crunching through the crust of ice. The ripple veered suddenly, angling toward the house, toward the crawl space. Cole cursed under his breath. It wasn't after the box. Not tonight. Shadow reached the hatch first, barking and snarling. Cole rounded the corner just in time to see the snow heave upward and split open. The pale creature rose half out of the ground, its long arms stretching toward the hatch. Cole raised the rifle and fired. The shot tore into the snow beside it, sending a spray of ice and earth into the air. The thing didn't flinch, it looked at him. Really looked, like it understood. Then it smiled. It wasn't a human smile. It dropped back into the snow, the surface sealing smooth behind it as if nothing had been there. Cole's chest heaved as he lowered the rifle. Shadow circled the hatch, barking furiously, tail rigid. That was when Cole realized what had just happened. It had drawn him away from the trap. Not because it wanted the box, but because it wanted him to think it still did. It was learning. Cole didn't go inside. Not yet. The fading daylight was gone, replaced by the cold clarity of a cloudless night. Moonlight spilled silver across the snow, making every track, every ripple stand out sharp against the white. Shadow paced near the hatch, still on edge, every muscle tight. Cole's breath steamed in the frigid air as he knelt beside him, running a gloved hand over the dog's neck. "It's not going to stop," he murmured. "Not unless we make it." He'd seen the way it moved, how it slipped through snow like water, how it avoided the box until it thought it could win. That smile earlier wasn't random. It was strategy. The only way to end this was to give it what it wanted, and then make sure it couldn't take it anywhere. Cole headed for the leaning fence post. The box's burial site sat still and untouched, but he didn't trust the quiet. He dug fast, his spade slicing into the cold-packed soil, revealing the dark earth beneath. When the metal edge scraped wood, the sound sent a shiver down his spine. The box was colder than before when he pulled it free, the frost clinging to its edges. Shadow whined, ears flicking toward the tree line. Cole didn't waste time. He carried the box to the center of the yard, setting it in the open where the moonlight hit it full. Around it, he planted the stakes again, only this time the chimes were larger, sharper, things he'd ripped from the shed walls. And instead of rope, he strung thin steel wire low across the snow. From his pack, he pulled the last thing, a small can of diesel. He poured a ring around the trap, soaking the snow in a dark, slick circle. The plan was simple. It came for the box. It got trapped in the wire. Then Cole lit the ring. He positioned himself on the porch with the rifle, Shadow crouched at his side, the both of them staring at that small, lonely box. The seconds stretched. Then, a ripple. It was slow at first, far out near the tree line, but moving straight for them. Cole's breath froze in his throat as he tracked it with the rifle, every muscle ready. Halfway to the trap, the ripple stopped. The snow went still. Cole scanned left, then right. That was when the chimes behind him rang. He spun, another ripple, faster this time, coming from the opposite side. It was trying to flank them. Shadow lunged off the porch, barking with a force that echoed in the night. Cole followed, boots hammering the snow. The ripple hit the open ground and rose. It was taller now, its limbs stretched thin, the black glass eyes locked entirely on the box. It moved forward without hesitation, and then hit the wire. The chimes screamed. Cole didn't wait. He raised the rifle and fired, the muzzle flash lighting the snow in harsh bursts. The thing staggered, but didn't fall. Its long fingers reached for the box, curling almost lovingly around the lid. Cole struck the match. The diesel caught instantly, a ring of fire roaring to life, the light throwing the thing's pale skin into grotesque relief. It shrieked, a sound like ice fracturing underfoot, and flinched back, its limbs twitching. But it didn't retreat. It paced the inside of the ring, trapped, those glassy eyes darting between the box and Cole. Shadow growled, stepping forward, but Cole held him back. "Not yet," he whispered. The thing's mouth opened, wider than should be possible, and it hissed one word, the same one it had whispered before. "Mine." Cole tightened his grip on the rifle. Not anymore. He aimed low, at the box itself, and fired. The bullet tore through the wood. There was a flash, not of light, but of something else. A rush of freezing air blasted outward, carrying with it a sound that made Cole's vision blur, like thousands of voices whispering at once. The thing screamed, its body convulsing violently. It staggered back into the flames, and for the first time, it didn't stop. The fire clung to it, crawling up its limbs, across its torso, until the pale shape was nothing but a writhing silhouette. Then it collapsed into the snow, twitching once before going still. The flames died down slowly, leaving only the charred remains of the box and a scorched patch of ground. Cole stood there for a long time, rifle still ready, waiting for any sign of movement. Shadow stayed at his side, ears forward, watching the same spot. Finally, the night went quiet again. Cole kicked snow over the burnt circle, dousing the last embers. When he was sure it was over, he crouched and ran a hand over Shadow's fur. "Let's go home," he said quietly. They turned toward the house, the moonlight bright on the snow, the yard looking almost peaceful again. Almost,